What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota and Danny Abdeljabbar. Danny, my good friend.
How are you, man? I'm doing good.
I am doing well as well. We're live from Chaz right now.
Chaz. You mean Chop?
Ch- Chaz, or they changed it from Chaz to Chop?
Yep, they changed it. It's the Capitol Hill Occupied Zone now because the Autonomous Zone sounds too commie for them.
Really? It's too commie for them?
Yeah, apparently.
That was the reason?
Well, I don't know if they used the exact
they said
words.
It was too commie?
I don't know if they used the exact words too commie, but that's the two and two that I'm putting in together.
It sounds a little like a oxymoron type situation, but yeah, it's so funny, it's so ridiculous that I can only make jokes about it. Like, I don't know, what's your initial view on the Chop?
I mean, I think it's an interesting experiment. I think a lot of political and social scientists will take a look at this, for quite some time to come. I think depending on what you're reading, what side of the aisle. I'm gonna mute you, Henry, because that's annoying as fuck. So, depending on what side of the aisle you're reading, you will either see that it is a lawless, fucking anarchic zone, or you will see that it is like this hippie commune where everyone shares things and, gets along and there are no cops, right? And I think the reality is probably somewhere in between, which is why I think it's an interesting experiment, and I'd like to see where it goes. But so far, it doesn't look like anyone's been hurt, except for maybe some businesses that aren't making quite as much money as they used to. But I mean, outside of that,
Raped over there.
I read that, but it's
super
unconfirmed, and I guess without cops, you can't really,
yeah,
you can't really figure that out.
I've been hearing from the Fox News orgs or just right wing people on Twitter,
yeah,
that there has been rapes and that there's at least been a couple of people who've been beat up, and then I guess there's been just the thievery and stuff like that goes on. But it kind of reminds me of, so you don't watch The Wire.
No, I still haven't picked it up.
you really do need to watch the Wire. It reminds me of season 3 when they make New Amsterdam or New Hamsterdam. Hamsterdam. So what they do is that one of the majors in the police, he creates a drug-free zone in Baltimore.
Okay.
And this drug-free zone, the intention is to divert all of the crime and all of all the drug dealers and all the crime into one place in the city. So what ends up happening throughout the season is that, normal neighborhoods start looking a lot better. There's a lot crime goes down but then if you go to this one area, cops don't go at all either. So they have a line where cops will cross and what they'll enforce.
Mm-hmm.
So in this one area, it's it looks like Escape from New York. It looks like an apocalyptic society. So I feel like it's like a diversion to divert all of the protest or all of the crazies that go along with the protest into one area and just have it contained into the 16 block area. That's my theory.
Well, I mean, I've seen some video on the ground and reporting on the ground where it's just mostly fucking people having parties and doing motivational speeches, and they've set up communal, stores and stuff like that where they get people get food and supplies and things like that, sometimes for free. So like I said in the beginning, depending on what you're looking at, what you're reading, what you're watching, you'll get two completely different sides of the story. And then hopefully there's people on the ground that are actually documenting it so that we can, look at it in the future and see, what's what.
I mean, all the stuff that I've been seeing has been mostly negative, but again, that's because I'm looking at more right-wing Twitter than left-wing Twitter. Or it's been facetious retweets of people like retweeting like an anchor, someone give kind of like dumb coverage of it, and someone from the right was like, "What do you mean it's peaceful? Look at these," that type of thing. But yeah, I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle. I'm sure. I don't think anyone has died yet. It is funny to watch a lot of people with. Oh, thank you for sending me that link. That some of them are armed.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've noticed. Some of them are walking around.
I did see that, and what's funny about that, if we're looking at like right-wing media, is that there's this one picture of this guy with like an assault rifle, and the original picture, he's standing with his assault rifle in front of like a red van, and then I was watching this on Vice, which is pretty left-leaning, and then they interview this dude, and they're like, yeah, they took this one picture that I took once, in Chop or Chaz, whatever you want to call it, and then they basically photoshopped him out and then started putting him like in different places, like, oh, here's this guy with the gun in front of like the the sign that says now entering Chaz, and basically like using him as the poster boy for why Chop or Chaz is like an aggressive, like, secessionist state, and so like I said, dude, I think the reality on the ground is somewhere in between. If you look at it from the lefties, this is like a social experiment. It's like a an interesting thing. And if you look at it from the righties, it's like, oh, they're seceding from the union, and all this other stuff, which is ironic in and of its own self. Considering a lot of right-wing people think it's cool for Texas to secede. I digress, though. I have seen the accounts of people with guns and stuff like that, and I think it's hilarious when, just a little ironic that, it's cool for right-wingers to tote their guns, but when the lefties do it, now, that's not cool.
Well, my take is that I don't really care that much. That's my take. I don't really feel any type of way. I'm just like, okay. We'll see how it ends.
Yeah.
Like that's my thing. All right, well,
I'm on the same boat.
We'll see what happens.
See what happens.
I'm not outraged by it, nor do I like have any appreciation for it. I'm just like, all right. Well, they're gonna try something like that.
Right.
It's better off not being part of the grand experiment. But I mean, I don't think anyone's been killed yet. So
nope.
I mean, that's what I'm kind of hoping for. No one gets killed.
Yeah, no one gets killed or seriously hurt.
Speaking of people of getting, this is a good transition, a little bit of a morbid transition. But speaking of people getting killed,
seriously,
and this will be the I guess the main topic of today's show. We're going to touch a number of things, but we are. Well, first of all, we're at our 150 right now. So this is episode 150.
Nobody's died yet in 150 episodes.
Nobody's died yet except Frank, who is the co-host for a couple episodes, but then we replaced him with Danny.
Yeah.
But
we don't talk about that though.
Yeah, he's kind of like the first drummer of the Beatles. Do you know his name?
Yeah, it was Peter Best or some shit like that, and then he released an album called Best of the Beatles. And like a bunch of people, a bunch of people ended up buying his album and were like severely disappointed by the fact that it wasn't like a Beatles compilation album.
Do you know who the original lead singer of Pink Floyd was named?
I do not. I don't. What was his name?
Syd Barrett. But he was actually like their front man until he went like absolutely insane, and then Roger Waters took over as like the new lead, who was the bassist. But he was just like a crazy. He got really into acid, like so many people at that time period.
Yeah, seriously, I was just gonna say that.
But most people don't know who Syd Barrett is, unless like you're like a fan of Pink Floyd. But yeah, speaking of people, so we're getting back to our roots to talk about not Middle East, but more so just world politics.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Geopolitics, international news, and what hasn't been getting that much attention, and you think it would be that there has been border brawls over
border brawls.
Border brawls, and this has actually been happening for a while. There's been a couple of fights between Indian and Chinese soldiers on their border in the Himalayan mountains, and there was another one. What was this? 2 days ago or yesterday? I'm losing track of days.
Monday, their local time, I guess for us. It
Monday
was Tuesday.
local time. Yeah. Where 20 confirmed Indian soldiers were killed in this fight between Chinese and Indian soldiers.
Yep.
Which is crazy.
That's a big troop count, you know.
That's a large number
in one day, you know.
In one day, and here is the craziest thing about it. Not a shot was fired.
Not a single bullet.
Not a single shot was fired. Meaning that it was like fisticuffs.
Well, it was a little more than fisticuffs, but
it was more than fisticuffs, but it was. I'm kind of thinking it probably looked like a Gangs of New York type fight.
100%. That's what it was. 100%.
So and of course it's sad when people die.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away of how. I mean, to me, it sounds pretty unique.
I mean, it's a crazy story, dude. Yeah, you're right. It's crazy that 20 soldiers died and they didn't use any bullets. Like a literal fist fight between Chinese and Indian troops happened in the Himalayas. Like, that's some fucking, like, 2020's crazy as shit. Can you imagine, like, months ago, like, saying, hey, in June, you're going to read a headline that says Chinese and Indian soldiers are going to get into a fist fight in the Himalayas and 20 of them are going to die? Like, what? This is some Onion level shit. Like, it's nuts to read about.
It's really crazy. If this happened anywhere, like if you were said that, in Syria, a bunch of people, this would never happen. Like a fight would always end up with gunfire. There's no treaties
that
are preventing them from using guns. But like if you said like there was a big street brawl and 20 people died, I'd be like, what the hell? Mm-hmm. If you just like any random border of countries and you're like these two, I guess this would happen in India and China if there was a place for it to happen. Yeah, it would happen on a border place on India.
Can you imagine if like it was like a border fight between Germany and Poland, like a fist fight between Germany and Poland, or like between like Brazil and Argentina or something like that. Like so it just sounds so ridiculous.
It could maybe happen in Eastern Europe somewhere.
Definitely. And it would have started over like a Ukraine. Football match or something like that,
They take football seriously, but yeah, let's get to this. So, what exactly happened? How did these guys start? Let's explain the border situation because I think the geography is important. So, China and India, they're next to each other. It's like in Indiana Jones 2 when he starts out in Shanghai, or I think he starts out in Shanghai. The Temple of Doom. Mm. You watch it? He starts out with his little sidekick, and he's fighting. I think he's fighting the triads, and they give him the antidote.
Why don't I remember that?
That was
Indiana Jones 2?
Temple of Doom. When it starts out, he's in this nightclub in Shanghai, and he is. I think he's transferring this ancient artifact, or was it a diamond? I forget exactly what it was. But then finally they're like, now you give me you give me the diamond for the antidote. And then Harrison Ford's like, antidote for what? And the guy's like, for the poison you just drank. So one of those classic lines. But they end up in India, the next scene, because they take a flight and they crash land. I don't know why I used that reference to explain the borders of India and China, but that's how I first made sense of it when I was like when I was younger. Like, oh yeah, that's how they got from the first part
China to India,
the movie, to the second part.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they've been fighting over this place in the Himalayan mountains. I guess it's been undisputed. It's been contested.
Right.
Mm-hmm. This borderline for going on about 70 years, 80 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So explain what this border is and why people are brawling over it.
I mean, this has been going on for a fucking long time. I think the best place to start would be, in the height of the Cold War, so during the Cold War, India initially opted for neutrality. They didn't want to get involved. But after a couple like visits from the USSR to India, China wasn't super happy with India, right? And they were both very large countries. I mean, they've had giant populations at the time, even then, and they were both up and coming as well. So China wasn't super happy about that. The fact that that Russians were visiting India. Then later, China decides to annex Tibet, and the Dalai Lama flees to India, right? And there's like a whole fucking crazy story about that in general that I don't want to go off on a side tangent for, but the fact that the Dalai Lama, left and fled to India, it increases the tension between the two countries because for, like religious reasons, he's kind of the figurehead of Tibet. Anyway, I won't go down that road. So around, maybe we can even take it back before the Cold War, like well before, in 1914, this is when, India was still dominated by Britain. They were like what was the official title, where they were, help me out, Henry. It wasn't like a colony. Was it a colony? I guess officially it was a colony of the British. Let's call it a colony.
It was British India.
Yeah, British India, but like, what was it? It wasn't like a state. It wasn't like, it was like a colony. I'm gonna call it a colony because I don't remember the word.
It's been a colony for most of its time, so I don't think anyone's gonna crucify you.
It's a colony, right? So India is a colony of Britain. So representatives of Britain, some folks from the Republic of China and Tibet, they gathered together in an area called Syria, which is now currently India, to basically negotiate a treaty that would, figure out what the status of Tibet was. And this was before, China decided to annex it during the Cold War. And basically figure out what the borders were between China and British India. And that was like the whole point of that meeting. And Chinese really didn't like the idea of allowing Tibet to be like autonomous and still under Chinese control, but autonomous. They didn't like the idea. They thought it was just theirs.
It's the British Raj, by the way.
Thank you. It was a Raj, right? So Britain and Tibet, they ended up signing a treaty together, and they formulated what would be called later the McMahon Line, which was named after a British colonial officer, Henry McMahon, who initially proposed that border. So India believes that the McMahon Line, from this point on, is the official legal border between India and China, but China never accepted the deal, and this was way back in 1914. And so in July of that year, Britain was like, yo, you better get in the line, China, because there's going to be some trouble if you don't, and you don't sign this agreement. There never ended up being any immediate trouble, and I think they had their hands full with like World War I and shit. So that's where we're at in 1914. This is where, the first recognizable dispute over the land happens. Skip forward a bunch of years, 1947, India declares its independence from Britain. And then 2 years later, Mao basically says that the communist revolution is over, and they create the People's Republic of China. So we have two, burgeoning regional powers who recently remade themselves, on the world stage. On the one hand, China becoming the People's Republic, the communist country, and on the other hand, India declaring independence from Britain. So they're both coming up, and they both also at this point claim the number 1 and number 2 spot for population in the world, and they have this mutually mutual dispute over the border, right? So this becomes a bit of a problem. So pretty much right after it, they decide to go to war over it. So the pretext around this was Tibet, right? Where China thinks that they were never an independent nation and couldn't have legally set up an international border with anyone. And of course, India disagreeing. So China wanted control of some critical roadways near its western frontier in Xinjiang. And then India and some of the Western allies that it had, saw that as an affront. They thought that the Chinese were going to start, exporting Maoist-style communism all over the region, and they didn't like that very much. So they had a bit of a war about it. And this actually ended up happening in 1962. So the war actually kicked off in 62. Some Chinese troops crossed that McMahon line. They basically set up shop in pretty deep into Indian territory. They captured a bunch of mountain passes, a bunch of towns, set up a bunch of fortifications, and ultimately that war only lasted a month, but it was pretty brutal. It was over 1,000 Indian deaths, and 3,000 Indians were taken as prisoners. The Chinese only suffered about 800 deaths, so pretty disproportionate there. And then, I mean, the basic premise of this war is that fucking China spanked the shit out of India, right? Like, they really wrecked them. And to this day, it's kind of like a source of national embarrassment for India. So it's kind of also like the pretext of all of the subsequent skirmishes. I don't know, India trying to get back at China for this, right?
I wonder how much it has to do with just like the geography of the maps during that war, because the McMahon line goes right over the mountains,
right?
In like
right
in highlands,
Himalayas, right?
I wonder how much that has to do with them just having favorable positions, because I don't know like what the geography is, obviously, of the Himalayas on the Chinese border versus the Indian border.
It's the same.
I know the biggest. I mean, the largest mountains are in Nepal.
Right.
That's about as
but
much
it's
as
still
I really
very
know.
It's very rugged land. It's very mountainous. In the winter, there are barely any roads in general. But
it's brutal.
It's fucking brutal.
And it's probably why the war only lasted that long.
Yeah, because you can't keep that shit up.
You can't keep a war like that going on. You cannot wage a war like that in the winter.
No, and that's actually some good context for why we have this like skirmish, this week, because it's starting to get warm again. Like, usually a lot of the tension between the border picks up because what ends up happening is the Chinese start doing some infrastructure and development projects on their side, and the Indians start doing some infrastructure and development projects on their side, and that ultimately has them butting heads because they disagree on where the line is, right? Where's the border? So, and they tend to do this in the summer, so that's why we, start seeing these things. But I'll talk a little bit more, I think, later.
That makes sense. That makes sense why it seems like so personal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, it seems like such like a personal fight. Like, this doesn't seem like this came from the tops up. It looks like it was a decision made by the officers on the field to go fuck them up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're in close contact with each other a lot. Like, they cross
like,
paths patrolling and shit,
You built this road over like roads that we already marked, or you destroyed our, one of our.
It's all about roads, honestly. Like, the majority of this shit is roads, with one exception, but the majority of these fights that happen over time is about like road building. Like, they want to figure out supply chains and roads and stuff like that. So part of it is so that they can deploy troops faster, but also other parts of it is just because they want to take advantage of the economic situation in the region. And
how many places can you actually build roads over there?
Not a lot. It's fucking mountains. It's like, it's crazy, So there's only so many places. Yeah, there's only so many places where you could build a road.
It's not like the desert in the Middle East where
it's not flat.
You could just jump on a Hilux and really go whatever direction you want with a GPS.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's why I never got the whole thing about the land bridge. Like, I always just like...
We'll talk about that because there is something important for that.
All right.
For this, but that'll come towards the end. Let's kind of get back to this. So we were in 62. They had a month-long war. It was very bloody. Chinese spanked the shit out of India. So 1967, we have like War 2.0. So a scuffle broke out. Unsurprisingly, when some Indian troops started laying some barbed wire along what it recognized as their border, and the Chinese disagreed, of course, and that really quickly escalated into a bit of a war, because then the Chinese decided to start firing artillery shells at the Indians because they were laying barbed wire in what they consider their turf. It's pretty fucking hard escalation there, and by the end of that, 150 Indians died and 340 Chinese were killed. So in this time, the Indians won, and they pushed the Chinese kind of well back into their territory. And this was the last time that people died over this border dispute until this week, 1967. Right?
So that's great. So this has been what? I can't really do math that quickly. It's been 6 decades.
Yep.
Since someone has died over this.
Yeah. So nobody's died, but that doesn't mean that they haven't fought, right? Like after that war, they basically came to
Well,
some.
I've heard stories about fist fights for a while.
Mm-hmm.
For years, I've heard about them getting into fist fights with each other, but I never heard of a bunch of them dying because I just add some. I know we're going to get into this, but like from what I've read, what was about 300 Chinese troops versus what about 50 Indian soldiers or something like that.
Yeah, that
I'm
was
pretty sure
approximately the proportion. Yeah.
I think that the Indian soldiers were outnumbered by a
Oh
lot.
hell yeah. Yeah.
However, I'm sure some Chinese people died too.
Yeah, and that's kind of funny about it, like because the Chinese state is being super tight-lipped about anyone who's died. Go figure. It's China, right? But there's been some reports on the Indian side that there were some casualties on the Chinese side. They're just unconfirmed. And like, you know, being realistic, like, yeah, they were outnumbered, but there's, you know, like Indians can hold their own. They've got some really good troops and very well trained forces. They've been fighting Pakistan for fucking ever, you know, so like they know how to fight. The idea that no Chinese people died is kind of silly, right? They definitely killed some. Like I mean,
I would take the Indian military over the Chinese military.
I would take the Indian soldiers over the Chinese soldiers.
In terms of soldiers, yeah. I would take over the Chinese soldiers.
Military, 100%. I'm on China's side. Like if we're just talking straight up all out war, it's China's going to dominate. But that's a different story, I think.
They're two of the largest militaries on Earth, and they both are nuclear. They both have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but like we have to take nukes off the table because, like, you know, once the nukes start flying, everybody loses anyway, right? So, you know,
but a war between China and India would be a loss for both of them, most likely.
For sure.
If they fought a border war.
For sure, but I don't actually think China would try to fight a border war with them. I think they would just
no, they're not dumb.
They would firebomb them with medium range missiles because they have so many of them. That's the approach that they would take, and that's why I think they would fucking decimate India. I think that, and their economy is way stronger, so like they can keep up a war for longer. You know, I think they would just firebomb the shit out of them. But that's I think it's side note. Maybe we can talk about that later. But like I said, so 1967 was the last time people actually died, or at least recorded that people died. But they've fought plenty since then. And I think since 1967, India and China has basically had this like mutual agreement not to use weapons in the region, right? I don't think there's like an actual formal treaty that they've written down, but it's just kind of like understood, like, hey, we should probably not bring guns to this region. And they're pretty good about sticking to that, which, I mean, good for them, I guess. I don't know. But I'll tell you a little bit about some additional fights that have happened. So in 1987, the Indian military, they were conducting a training operation to see how fast they can move troops to the border. And this like totally spooked the Chinese, who responded by also moving a shit ton of troops to the border. And then at some juncture, both of them decided like, oh shit, we could start a war like this. So they both backed down. And it was just kind of a stalemate. In 2013, a Chinese platoon decided to set up a camp along the border, which is kind of like a unspoken no-no. Like you can't do that. Like roads is one thing, but like straight up encampments, like they try not to do those. But so India just responds in kind, and they set up their own camp, and then both sides start heavily fortifying those camps, and they start like bringing in like heavy weaponry and like different machines and shit like that. And again, they're like, oh, okay, we could start a war this way. So they mutually agree to dismantle their camps and avoid a war. In 2017, the Chinese actually decided to build a road in the Himalayas in Bhutan, not in India, in Bhutan, but India considers that region in Bhutan to be like a strategic buffer zone between India and China. So India got pissed off, and they sent a bunch of troops and bulldozers and shit to destroy the road. And this part is crazy. Both sides ended up in a rock throwing war. Like, I'm not even kidding. They were throwing rocks at each other like some schoolyard shit. And some people got hurt, but not really critically. Definitely no one died. And then at some juncture, they decided to withdraw.
It sounds like
middle school turf wars.
It sounds like two Palestinian protest movements fighting each other.
Opposing Palestinian protest movements. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like hard to believe that no one pulled out a gun and shot somebody.
You know, the amount of restraint on both of these countries' parts, like, this is what's so fucking interesting about this story, because, like, they were straight up, like, throwing rocks at each other, and, like, some people did get hurt, and it's surprising that they weren't like, yo, just fuck this shit, I'm just gonna shoot these guys, you know? The amount of restraint that goes into this, you know, it really makes me think warfare, you know, like, maybe we should just, this is how we should settle our disputes, just hand-to-hand combat, you know, throw rocks and shit, you know, see who wins. But, so that was 2017. 2020, this year, not this week, this happened in May, another fist fight actually happened, and this time it was at a glacial lake in the border, and some Indian troops got pretty hurt, actually, critically, and they had to get medevaced out. China basically hardened their line with dump trucks and, like, armored vehicles and shit, and then at some point, fucking the tweeter-in-chief decides to offer his mediation skills, of course, on Twitter, which is a joke.
Oh, tweeter-in-chief burned, Danny.
Yeah. That was total joke. Eventually, both sides decided to stand down for just obviously a couple of weeks. And then we get to today, or at least this week, a fist fight broke out in the Ladakh region. And what was crazy about this particular fist fight is that it wasn't like fists particularly. It got pretty fucking brutal. Like, they picked up anything that they can find. I'm talking about, like, fucking signposts, you know, barbed wire wrapped clubs. There was even this one report that I read, it's unconfirmed, but, like, wooden clubs that they stuck nails into. Like, they straight up made like Mad Max weapons, you know, like post-apocalyptic or like anti-zombie weapons. They just cobbled them together and they straight up went to war.
Anti-zombie weapons, that's a good way to put it.
You know?
So signposts, bats, sticks, rods, barbed wire, batons.
Yep.
Is what I saw.
You know, they call it barbed wire batons, and it makes it sound like it's an actual weapon. But what I've read is literally just steel bars that they wrap barbed wire around. They're calling it batons. It makes it sound fancier than it actually is. It's literally like they just cobble together whatever they can find.
It's like even our gangs use more firepower than that.
Yeah, they do. They do. I mean, it's crazy, man. Like,
two neighbors in a family feud use more firepower than that.
It makes me think like it's weird. Like, obviously, I don't like when you know there's loss of life, but I can't help but being so interested in, like, wish that a video surfaces of this, because I just want to see. I just want to see it. Like, how did this shit go down? You know.
Well, this happened at night, right?
Yeah, it did happen at night, so it'd be hard to see, but, like, I just still want to see it. You know.
From what because the sources I've read, it sounds like Chinese troops snuck up on these guys at night and just started beating the fuck out of them.
Yeah.
And you know, they responded with what they had, but I wonder what the casualty number will be from China if they admit one, if there was. I mean, because 355 is significantly more people. Like 300 people will put a walloping on 55 people, but 300 people is a lot of people to be, like, actively involved in a brawl.
Yeah.
At one time, because, like, it's so funny because usually we're talking about, like, you know, military combat, like, not street fighting, like trying to, like, think like, oh, what, like, what's
analyze
realistic
street fighting, you know,
like analyzing, like, just fighting. Because that's like when brawls get that big, not everyone's part of the action. You know, there's some people who are stepping out and stepping in.
Mm-hmm. I mean, with that many people in there, I'm sure there was plenty of the Chinese that, like, ran up and, like, saw zero action. You know, they were just there, because, like, 300 to 50, like, that's like if you were in the back of that line, you probably saw no action whatsoever. But like a
Or
lot,
maybe it was just 6-on-1 essentially for every.
well, then maybe I don't know. It's crazy to think about, man. Like all I'm thinking is just like action movies, and the fist fights in action movies and shit, and like how that would go down, which makes me so interested to see like how did that go down, like what happened? Because I said, I got to give it to the Indian soldiers. They're battle hardened. They know what they're doing. I wonder like how good of a fight did they put up? Did they immediately flee, or like when they realized that they were outnumbered, or like did they get some shots off? Like I'd like to see that. I don't know. It's just strange interest that I have. But 20 Indian soldiers did end up dying, right? And some of them died pretty brutally because they fell into like an ice cold river.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like a lot of that has to do with the location of where they were fighting.
Yeah.
So that's like abnormal. That's an abnormal amount of people to die in a fight. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know they were carrying weapons and essentially makeshift weapons, but that's an unusual amount of deaths.
That's a high kill
in a brawl
rate.
like that.
That's a
Like that's
really,
a very
really high
very
kill rate.
high, a very very high kill rate because human bodies are oddly resilient.
Yep.
You can resist like a walloping, even if you are beat up with bats and batons or whatever. You can take it. Obviously, you can die. Any accidents happen, and like even now, this is why you should, if you're an adult, you shouldn't be fighting people because there's always a chance that you or the person you're fighting can end up dead with some freak accident.
Right.
Either if you punch someone
You
and
just
they
strike them in the wrong
knocked
place,
out,
Mm-hmm.
in the wrong place, and they fall down and hit their head on something.
Mm-hmm.
You should avoid fighting for those reasons because it is dangerous. But I mean,
And I think to that point though, we are talking about soldiers, right? Battle hardened soldiers.
yeah, we're talking
so
about men. We're talking about men, like grown ass
Yeah.
men fighting each other,
Yeah.
who are probably in their 20s and 30s, full of testosterone.
Yeah.
Ready to fuck someone up
Yeah.
after a lot of tension. But I mean, it's still just an alarming number of people who died. We're talking about, if my math serves me correct, we're talking about almost 50% of these guys were murdered. Like they were murdered.
Yeah. Well,
It was a murder campaign.
would you call it a murder if they died when they were fleeing?
If they
Like some of them were straight up murdered, like beaten to death. And then some of them were fleeing and fell off a ravine into an ice cold river and then died of hypothermia.
I mean, yeah, that's still. I mean, by our laws in the U.S. states, you'd be charged for murder with that.
Yeah, maybe manslaughter, second degree murder, maybe, I don't know.
You can get second degree murder for that, but yeah, obviously the location of them falling into a ravine and just because the geography is so crazy there added to that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still kind of blown away by the size of that. I want to like look into other large street fights or other large brawls throughout history without guns, and like compare the casualty rate.
Yeah,
Because
that would
we're
be
talking
interesting.
about because a lot of people would die in like medieval battles before we had fire, Roman battles or
Firearms and shit.
firearms and stuff. But we're talking about tens of thousands, if not tens of thousands of people or who are organized with sharp, pointy things and
Right.
stabbing people with that.
Right, and they had weapons, like proper weapons in those times. What we're talking
Yeah.
about is like the Chinese decided at night one day to, fucking duct tape up a barbed wire, club and like go terrorize some Indians. Like that's what they decided to do. Like they weren't planning for this. They didn't have swords.
It'd be cool if there was a samurai sword fight.
That would be pretty cool. Like a fucking, well, Chinese aren't Japanese, so they wouldn't have samurai swords, but they would have some short swords. And then like, I guess, don't Indians have like those like sabers, those like curvy sabers?
It'd be cooler if they both had lightsabers.
That would be fucking legit. But then I'd be asking a whole different set of questions, like where the fuck did you get a lightsaber, and how can I acquire one? But neither here nor there. I think, not to beat a dead horse here, but a lot of people died. But like, I think the questions that this raises is like, why? Like I get it. They've been fighting over this border for a really long time, but why does it matter this much? And there's a lot of like geopolitical motivations and implications for the border dispute. And I think if you want, to talk about that, we kind of have to talk a little bit about Kashmir again. So we've done an episode 40 episodes ago, so episode 110 on Kashmir, and we kind of discussed the ongoing dispute of that territory, Kashmir and Jammu, between India and Pakistan. It's a long story. It's a good one, very highly downloaded one. So if you want more context, I definitely recommend you go back and listen to that. And I think the best part of that episode, which I'd like to share with you on live, on the live stream here, is this Indian fighter pilot who got shot down by Pakistan. And this guy, it's an interesting story by itself, but I'm just going to show you a picture of this guy so you see what I mean. It's like on the screen right now, we see this just Indian dude who has the most ridiculous handlebar mustache that I've ever seen. And when I was doing research for Kashmir and this guy came up, I just couldn't help but laugh my ass off. Like, who decided this was a good idea?
This guy's mustache connects with his hairline, right?
Yeah, it just comes out full throttle. It's got a real hard angle down and then back up again. It's just interesting. Anyway,
it kind of looks like Wario's mustache,
a little bit
in Mario Brothers,
a little bit
like upside down on his lip.
Mm-hmm. It's like an upside down Wario stash. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's now I'm trying to twist my head to look at the picture, but it looks utterly ridiculous and hilarious. And it was very funny to like see this guy pop up on the news.
Yeah, because he was all over the news too. Yeah,
he was all over the news for at least like the news that covers like global politics. And every single time that I saw it, I started laughing. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy, and what is up with this guy's mustache?
It was funny too because when they released him, he still had that like perfect mustache. It's like, wait, did they let you like shape that shit up while you were captured? Like, what's the deal here?
Pilots have like big egos, right?
Yeah, totally. I'm pumped for.
You have to have you have
Gun.
to have a huge ego. You have to have a huge ego to
fly a jet.
To rock that mustache and jet.
Yeah.
To do both.
Anyway, the TLDR, or I guess TLDL, too long didn't listen, for that podcast was that China backs Pakistan in this dispute for India and Pakistan over the Jammu and Kashmir region. And there was a couple of wars that were fought, and China ultimately took control of 20% of that region. And I think the main reason why a mostly desolate mountain region is so important is definitely fucking complicated, but I think we can basically boil it down to a few different points. So the first one, and this one's kind of soft, but it is a reason, is natural resources. All right, so there's definitely small reserves of natural gas, in this border region. So you can find minerals like bauxite, gypsum, limestone, coal, zinc, copper, all things that are pretty valuable if you know how to mine them and put them to good production use. It's not exactly like a gold mine or anything like that, but with these countries, especially growing economies like India and China, like they'll take anything and everything that they can get. So there are some motivations.
Yeah, Kashmir, they don't have a lot of minerals. They do have minerals, as you mentioned, mm-hmm. coal, zinc, copper, limestone, but they're not like some mineral.
It's not
wealth.
It's not like West Virginia and coal. Like they have it, and that's cool. And anyone who controls that region is definitely going to exploit it. But you can't not talk about it. Like of course they're going to want some of those natural resources.
Yeah, of course. There's a resource incentive, but I don't think that.
No, that's the soft reason.
That's like in benefit. Like we get their resource. have access to these natural resources that we didn't have prior to that. But I think things like power, not meaning like power,
yeah,
like I mean like
the
actual
electric variety.
electric power
Yeah.
and access to like water supplies
Those
for
are
energy,
much more,
energy
those are much
are
more
much
important. Yeah.
because there's glacial rivers over there, right?
Yep. So like they're in the Himalayas, and there's glaciers in the Himalayas. Those glaciers melt seasonally, and they create rivers, and those rivers, when dammed properly, can be a huge source of power, like power generation for the entire region. And that whole region is pretty rugged, right? So like, setting up, like gas powered or like other fossil fuel based electric plants or even nuclear plants up there would be kind of hard. So you got to kind of use what you got, and they have a lot of these glacial rivers that can power hydroelectric pumping stations. And so if you're in control of those glacial rivers, you are also in control of the power generation for that entire region. And kind of an offshoot of the hydroelectric power is, like you said, Henry, that water access, right? So these glacial rivers are a vital water supply for both India and Pakistan. So that water can easily be diverted and controlled if you have this region. And that's hugely important to both India and Pakistan, and obviously creates a huge incentive for China, because if they have it, they can gain leverage over those two countries, but especially India.
And the land bridge.
Oh, that's your favorite word.
The land bridge. I guess China, what I think is, and what you pointed out as well, I think the main thing that they're interested in is obviously the energy resources are great, as well as the natural resources, but China's economic goals to create essentially a new Silk Road.
Silk Road 2.0.
Silk Road 2.0, so they can flood markets west of them in Africa and Europe with shitty products everywhere.
Just faster. They're already doing it. Just they want to do it.
I mean, they're
faster.
already doing it, but they want to make a road that they can export their shitty stuff to.
Right.
To Europe and India.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not Europe, but to Europe and Africa.
Right. And this area, specifically around Kashmir and Jammu, but also the Ladakh region, it's vitally important because they actually can use that to gain access to Western Asia, and by transversely the rest of the world by land. And this is part of their Belt and Road, the road part of their Belt and Road initiative, and they're investing like $1 trillion into this, so there's like a lot of money behind this. So they have like a giant vested interest in making sure that they control this region and that they have like a firm grip over those, questionable borders.
That whole region, though, is like, I always get kind of whenever we talk about China, India, the first thing I really think of, though, is this region. It's so damn rugged.
Yep.
Like, I don't think that there's a more rugged place on earth.
Yeah,
Maybe
can you name Afghanistan? Areas of Afghanistan are very similar, but like, you're right, dude. We're talking about the Himalayas. Like tallest mountains in the world.
I think Afghanistan definitely has a more diverse geography within their borders compared, because they have mountain ranges, deserts, forests, all, pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
But this border along the between really the whole area of
India,
northern
China, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, Tibet, like that whole chain of countries is really rugged terrain.
I get sucked into documentaries about like Nepal and Mount Everest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you ever follow that?
Yeah, dude.
Like I get obsessed with this thing about the life of Sherpas.
Yeah.
In Nepal,
and how they don't use oxygen because they're badass.
Because they're just so used to the lifestyle, but their job is among the most dangerous jobs on earth.
Yep.
To frequently go up mountains that will kill you when you enter a certain level of altitude.
Yep.
If you're there for prolonged, it's like, the does in Sonic the Hedgehog when you're underwater and that noise goes off, that like the "you're gonna die" music goes off.
Oh yeah. Mm. I won't mimic the sound, but I know what you're talking about.
Don't mimic it. It's like, you have a time zone of when.
There's a time limit of
you have,
how
you
long
have
you can get up there.
You have a finite amount of time until you can get back down to safety. But like those guys die all the time. Like there'll be an avalanche, that will kill about 20 of them. And not just that, like just the animals that you find in that area.
Snow.
You ever look at like
leopards?
Snow leopard. You ever see? I think it's called a snow. It's not a snow monkey. It's like the native monkey species over there.
Uh-huh.
It's like a monkey with big lips. They look foolish.
I wonder what evolutionary trait the giant lips serve, but I mean, I think this all kind of underscores like how fucking crazy that whole region is, and the fact that that all these countries dispute this territory is nuts.
It is called I don't know why this is in my head right now. A snub-nosed monkey.
Snub-nosed monkey.
Yeah, snub-nosed monkey.
The more you know.
If you look it up, you'll be like, wow, that animal exists.
Let's see. I don't think I have enough time to throw it up on the screen here, but
Just look up snub-nosed monkey.
Oh, yeah. That's just crazy. Big mouth and, like, yellow, kind of sunken in eyes. Nose looks like a skeleton nose. Whole
I had
face
zero
looks
clue.
like a skeleton.
I had no clue that animal existed until maybe last year.
Well, this is the first time I'm hearing of it, so...
Everyone, look up snub-nosed monkey.
Scary looking.
It's haunting, but it's also quite human at the same time. Haunting but human. All right. So yeah, this has been crazy. Do you want to do a kind of a shameless transition to the next topic?
Hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much
all right.
all I had to say about the topic.
So, Syria. Let's talk about Syria.
Cereal.
Because we haven't talked about Syria in a while, and the main thing that we've been doing has been covering the war, or at least the ending of the war, up in Idlib, and there hasn't really been too much going on. I know Russia has had there's been a ceasefire with Russia at least, but they started bombing targets up there again, I believe last week. So they're actively fighting again. But the big news that's coming out right now, also in that region, I should know that now the Turks, Turkey is now fighting the Kurds in Iraq.
Yep.
As well.
Yep.
Which you knew was going to happen.
Yeah, but like I felt like we took our eyes off of it for a little while, and of course it was going to pop up again.
Because they don't distinguish the Kurdish groups.
Nope.
They're just like Kurds.
Don't like them.
Like Kurds outside, like anyone that has a autonomous zone outside is a potential area for PKK to go in and out of. Like, gotta protect ourselves from all of it.
Honestly, if there were some Kurdish people in Chaz, I think Turkey might target them too.
That's how you get rid of it, guys. Say there's Kurds in there, and then
Turkey will roll in. Fucking Erdogan.
Hey, you know what's kind of funny though? I'm sure a lot of those people in Chaz probably trained with Kurds.
With the Kurds. They went with the Peshmerga, and they were just like, "Hey, teach us how to autonomous."
No, I'm serious. There's a lot of sympathy between like very very left wing groups in the U.S. or around the world with Kurdish groups, because a lot of them are Bookchinist, or close to Marxist. So the so Rojava, have you ever seen that? It's called like some left-wing activist groups went to Kurdistan or at least in Syria, they joined forces with the SDF and fought with them. A lot of them got killed in Afrin.
Who? Which group is this again?
Just left wing groups in not just in the U.S., but I think a lot of them were from the U.S. went to fight with the Kurds, like Antifa types.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
And because they have a lot of, I guess, camaraderie, because they're both have very left wing politics, and a lot of them went to Syria, and they went up to in Afrin. There was a big slaughter of a lot of these Kurdish soldiers and a lot of these left wing militants from the Turkish Air Force, because Assad had recently protected that zone with anti-aircraft, but he decided that he turned them off. They made a deal with Erdogan to turn them off because they were, I forget the exact reason why they did it, but they let Turkey roll in and they killed a lot of them. But if you look at the we support the people of Rojava.
Oh, you know what? You showed me that video a while ago when we were talking about the Kurdish. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I do remember that now.
Type in Rojava Solidarity.
No, I remember you showing me that video. Yeah, that does come to mind.
So maybe you can make the connection between Kurds and
Chaz. Chop.
And Chaz.
Excuse me, Chop. It's Chop now.
Chopped, excuse me. If the right-winger media personality was listening right now, maybe they try to spin that.
Oh, you see, the Kurds and the Peshmerga, they set up shop in shop, right? And you see, now we got Erdogan on the side of Trump, and he's going to roll in with some Turkish tanks and S-400 systems, and he's going to destroy Chop, yeah.
I think most people in the U.S. are confused if they're supposed to like the Kurds or not like the Kurds. They're like, hey, are we supposed to like that group or not like them? Because the media has always kind of changed over the years.
Well, I mean, it just depends on what phase of the Syrian civil war we were in.
Yeah.
Depends on the.
Are they good or bad?
Yeah.
Yeah, like at 2017, 2016, they were obviously
heroes. Yeah.
The heroes, and then there's been different times where they haven't been the heroes, right. But I mean now they're just kind of who gives a fuck.
Nobody talks about it anymore.
That's not my words.
Yeah.
That's the words of our foreign policy.
Yeah.
But so in Syria there was. So I don't know if we did a podcast on this or not, but did we talk about Trump's defense policy bill? I'm sure we talked about it.
I mean, we've talked about.
In December of last year, the one with the $738 billion.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely talked
budget.
About that. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely talked about it. I forgot what episodes we talked about it, but in that bill, there was something called the Caesar Act, and in the Caesar Act, it is now taking effect. And essentially, what it is, they are U.S. sanctions imposed on Syria, specifically, more sanctions. Specifically against any country that provides support to Syria. So this means that no foreign business or bank can really do business with they say targeted industries and targeted officials, but the problem with these sanctions and these bills is that they're so vague that the risk becomes so high doing business with anyone from Syria because you don't know if they're targeted or not, or if they're on that sanction list.
Right. So you just unilaterally just don't do business with Syria.
Yeah. I mean, that would be what you would do. I mean, that's what any smart business person would do. If you knew there was a risk and you had no idea, what if this person crosses the line of someone who would be sanctioned underneath this act? after you start doing business with them.
Right.
There's there's hundreds of gray areas that you can think of with this.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a bank, if I am a supplier or a vendor, I'm just going to say, I'm not doing business with Syria. Like, I don't want to get the wrath of the U.S. government on me. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So the issue is that, there's been a war going on there for about 9 years now.
Right.
That's still going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way to really rebuild it.
They can't kickstart that economy back up because they can't export and they can't import.
And another huge problem is that they have a shortage on medication,
right.
which is like a big problem.
Have you read anything about like the COVID-19 crisis in Syria? Like, that's something I haven't read yet.
So in the Middle East, there are COVID-19 concerns and there are deaths related to COVID-19. Not as bad as Europe. However, the reason why the Middle East is not having as big of a problem, there are places that are having terrible problems, like Yemen,
mm-hmm.
for example. Their health system collapsed, but their health system had already collapsed.
Right.
So
from
it
the
could
cholera
be a really bad
outbreak, basically, yeah.
Yeah, from the cholera outbreak and the war
mm-hmm.
and the famine and the starvation.
Yeah.
So it could have been like a bad cold that everyone could have put their health system over.
Right.
So it's not surprising at all that, when a new disease entered that country, that things were their health system wouldn't be able to handle it all.
Yeah, it was going to go south quick, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the Middle East is very young. So the majority of the people in the Middle East are younger than 40 years old, or younger. They're definitely younger than 50 years old. So they have a much better chance against this than people in the West who have older populations.
Mm-hmm.
So their death toll is not as high.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that they don't have the ability to really test as much as well.
Yep, probably not. Yep.
But no, it's definitely a concern in those countries because they can't really handle it. Like Syria can't really handle it right now if they had a really big outbreak. But what they have in the Middle East is a whole lot of minerals and a whole lot of young people, a combination of the two. So what this is really forcing them to do is that they're going to have to. So let me just pull this back right now. So their economy has already has collapsed already. So before the war, the dollar was equivalent to about 50 Syrian pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So the exchange rate today, the dollar is trading at almost 3,000 Syrian pounds.
Ouch, that's huge. Talk about runaway inflation. Crazy.
And with the financial crisis, Syria has to depend on Lebanese banks. And Lebanon is having their own financial crisis.
Yeah, they have their own problems for sure.
So it's like, what the fuck do you do? So this is going to halt reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
The demands that are supposed to be met on the Syrian and Russian side are like unachievable that are set by the U.S. It's in order to list. I have them written down. So they have to agree to these 7 demands. Syria and Russia must cease using Syrian airspace to strike civilian spaces. So they consider all of Idlib civilian.
Mm-hmm.
The entire province is civilian.
Mm-hmm.
So just telling them to put a standstill on the war. Zones controlled by Syria, Russia, and Iran must allow humanitarian aid to enter.
I think that's fair.
Syria must release. Well, they don't want aid going into rebel-held areas like Army of Conquest.
It's humanitarian aid. It doesn't discriminate between good guys and bad guys.
They're blocks.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, at the stage that they're at now, this war is that I think that Assad and the pro-Syrian side has made up their mind who the terrorists are.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't a terrorist, you would already you wouldn't be living in those areas. I think that's kind of their mentality with that last province.
Mm-hmm. And so they don't want humanitarian aid going to them because they don't want to aid their enemies. I get it, but it's humanitarian aid. It doesn't discriminate for good guys and bad guys. It's just aid for humans, and we're all humans. So, like, I don't know. I think they're being a little bit much on that front. Airspace, so, you can make some claims that that's not a good idea on airspace stuff, but I'm 100% for the humanitarian aid. So what else is on there? Like what else?
So Syria must release all political prisoners and allow international investigators access to prisons.
And on the face of it, sounds interesting. But
political prisoners can mean a lot of things.
Yeah. Could be terrorists. It could be actual terrorists. Yeah, it could be actual terrorists. Yeah.
And they don't want to allow investigators to access these prisons. I mean, it's kind of funny because the Caesar Act, the name is named after the Syrian photographer who published all these pictures of like war crimes in Syria during the start of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was blamed on the Syrian government. But what ended up happening was that when they looked into it, they found out that it was like 50-50 between Syria, between people who were victimized by the Syrian government and people who were victimized by rebels.
Mm-hmm.
So it was misleading.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt they were, the Syrian aren't, they were torturing and doing all that nasty stuff. We used to have a relationship with Syria where we would torture people in Syria. Like, oh, we need to have someone tortured. We would do it in either Egypt or Syria.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
if they couldn't get them to Guantanamo, that is. Yeah.
So Syria, Russian, and other forces cannot bomb health centers. The Syrian regime must take legal steps against those who have committed war crimes and allow the return of refugees and compensate civilians for deaths of their relatives. So with health centers,
is that all one thing, or are those two things?
It's all.
That is all one demand?
Yeah. Or I just read it wrong. But
because
they sound like two things.
Yeah, it sounds like two things because I'm like, wow, that's one really strange ask. So the first part of that, it says like Syria and Russian and other forces cannot bomb health centers. Like, duh. Like, that's bad. But I understand where Syria would be like, yeah, but the rebels, they're setting up in hospitals. So are we not just supposed to let them be there? I get it, but you don't fucking bomb hospitals. Like, that's just not a good idea.
What they would say is that they intentionally set up in hospitals to prevent them from being fired upon.
Yeah, but the hospital still needs to stand. Like, that's critical infrastructure.
That's what they would say.
Yeah.
The Syrian regime must take legal steps against those who have committed war crimes and allow the return of refugees and compensate civilians for the deaths of their relatives. So this is like the one that bothered me the most.
Yeah. No,
this is the one I find the most. This is ridiculous. What's preventing people from coming back to the country are the sanctions. Why would someone go back to the country knowing that there's such brutal sanctions that are taking place, that the economy is taking? Like, I don't get the philosophy around sanctioning people until everyone is so miserable that they
overthrow the government.
Overthrow the government?
Yeah.
That never works, though.
Hasn't worked in North Korea in like fucking 60 years.
Hasn't worked in North Korea. Didn't work in Iraq. It's not working in Iran. All it does is make the government more power, because you're also limiting the amount, the market capabilities, like the amount of free commerce that can go on within that country, within those borders.
Right.
So they depend more on the state. They end up having to, like, they have no other option than to depend on the state and depend on the wartime economy that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely, everything that they'll be getting in terms of medical supply and food will be either price gouge or they're going to be rationed in some way. But I think that's like such a really stupid point to put on there as like one of your demands. It's such a conflicting point. Like, the sanctions are causing refugees not to go back. Assad would like nothing more than to have refugees to come back and be part of the rebuilding process. But putting the sanctions on make Syria an incredibly a place that's already very undesirably an undesirable living place even worse.
I hear that.
And it's going to completely halt like any type of construction or reconstruction that can go on, because like who's going to want to?
I mean, yeah,
invest in
I hear that, but like it's also like I get why they wrote this in. I get why this demand exists, right? Because what they're trying to set up is a situation where, you know, people are held to account for war crimes, which I think I follow that 100%, you know, and like unless it's a third party commission coming in to like try these people, it'll be a sham anyway. So I think they could just try and play along with that first portion of it. But allowing the return of refugees, see, this is the part that I'm struggling with, just like you, but probably for a different reason. I guess the reason why I'm struggling with it is, are there reports of Syrians denying refugees coming back? You know? Like, is that a thing right now?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, because if there is, right, like Syrians denying refugees coming back because, like, just speaking hypothetically here, because they believe that maybe they're rebels, right, and they don't want them to come back. Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people fled from, you know, Idlib, right? Maybe they were sympathetic to you know, rebel causes, and Syria doesn't want them back, right? And if that was the case, I could see why they would write this in. But if it isn't the case, then I'm kind of on your side. It's like, well, they're not going to come back if they think it's shitty to go back. Like, why would they? So it creates kind of like a vicious negative feedback loop, you know?
And that's what I think these sanctions are meant to do, to make a really negative feedback loop.
Or they could be designed that way.
Or at the very least, that will be the outcome of them. Just like all sanctions, all they do is just make other people hate you and empower the people that you hate, that you're trying to turn them against. Like Iran, I just get so frustrated with Iran, with the sanctions with Iran. Iran's a place where there could be an organic type culture reformation or political movement that could make real change. There has been signs of that with the Green Revolution in Iran. And then you have assholes like Brian Hook making commercials about how we're keeping your embassy open and preserving your Persian rug. Essentially, if you overthrow the government, we'll stop being so hard on you. Like, do you realize what you're saying? Like, most people are not going to, they have some sort of nationalism or some sort of pride about where they're from. They're not going to just quickly snap,
even just some sort of apathy, right? Like, most people don't feel like taking up arms to overthrow a government on a given Tuesday, you know, like that's not part of their agenda, you know? So really putting it on the people like that to say, like, we're going to keep sanctioning you and making your life miserable until you take up arms and overthrow your government just seems like a really big ask.
It is a really big ask. Hey, you guys want these sanctions to stop? Well, we could make them stop only if you just overthrew your government. We could do it, but you would have to do something for us. You'd have to go start a civil war.
A little quid pro quo, if you will.
Yeah. If you start a civil war, then we'll
talk.
We'll stop.
We'll talk.
Sanctions.
No. We'll talk.
We'll talk about that.
We'll talk.
I want about 50 murdered soldiers, and then we'll start shoveling you some weapons.
Table stakes.
Some sanction relief in terms of trucks and tow missile, maybe.
Yeah.
You got to be fighting someone.
Couple Toyota Hiluxes. Some tow missiles. You know.
Tow missiles.
Yeah.
Some machine guns will get you.
Some old Browning, you know.
An old Browning machine gun.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk.
Yeah.
But right now, your little stupid protest isn't doing anything. We don't give a shit about that. Here, we're going to throw some people with sniper rifles. We're going to put them on roofs. We're going to kill some of your protesters, and then we're going to kill some of their soldiers, and then let's just see what happens from there.
Yeah.
That's the recipe. That's how we do things.
Mm-hmm.
That's how intelligence agencies work. Just protest, we'll handle the rest. There'll be so much chaos before you know it, your whole family will be dead.
It's so fucked up, dude. It's so fucked up.
All right. Let's talk about let's segue into
lighter topic, maybe. Oh man.
Let's segue into the
best mustache of them all.
The defected human product.
The best mustache of the whole episode.
My favorite name for John Bolton. So Kim Jong-un calls John Bolton the defected human product.
That's a pretty sick burn, though, when you think about it. It's like kind of highbrow, but it's also like, damn, he called you defective, and he's not even a human product, you know. That cuts pretty deep, man.
Hey, man, I'm pro on this. I'm pro Kim on this one. So I don't know if you guys have heard, but John Bolton is releasing his shitty book.
The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton.
The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton. American hero. I can't wait to see the coverage he gets from people like Max Boot and Bill Crystal and the folks over at the Lincoln Project. Mm-hmm. The new forms that neoconservatives are taking.
Yep.
You know how. Do you see the Lincoln Project?
Do I see it?
You ever see it? You ever see like it's one of those organizations that is formed to appeal to liberals by neoconservatives.
Yeah, by shitting on Trump with their like videos and shit.
But it's like it's a very neoconservative type organization.
Yep.
And Glenn Greenwald did something so awesome the other day. So Rick Wilson, who's one of the founders of it, he like pulled up a tweet from Domino's, and I think the
pizza
Trump's
chain.
Domino's pizza chain. So I think it was his press secretary. I always forget her name. The attractive blonde girl, blonde woman.
McEnany.
I think it was her. Maybe it was somebody else, but she had tweeted at Domino's. You make better pizza than you have better pizza than New York pizza, something along that line. I don't have the tweet up. I'm paraphrasing it. And Domino's replied back saying, "Oh, that's one like wow, that's a great compliment. Like thanks." And then Rick Wilson, he retweeted that saying like your company's finished. And like the other day.
Oh, so like trying to start up a cancel culture because they agreed with Kayleigh McEnany.
Domino's replied back saying, "Wow, we didn't know that thanking a customer back in 2012 would be such a big deal, but I guess it's 2020." And then Glenn Greenwald, who's a left-wing journalist, he went back into all of his tweets dating from 2012 to like 2016 before the 2016 election campaign kicked off, and all of them were just like, Obama started this war, like Obama's weak, just like typical like Republican talking points that everyone's like sick of hearing, and just totally exposing this guy as a complete fraud. So it was a very fun thing to witness.
If I remember correctly, they put out a like an anti-Trump campaign video. I don't think they're campaigning for like Biden in particular, but they're campaigning against Trump. And the point that they're trying to make is like that he's not well. And one of the scenes that they use is that fucking scene where that video clip where Trump is walking up to Air Force One and he's got a piece of toilet paper stuck to his shoe. I thought that was hilarious. It definitely tickles the liberals, you know. I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
it's like liberal liberal
clickbait is what it is. Yeah,
clickbait or click porn or whatever, however you want to call it. But I love it when hypocrites get called out. Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that.
So back to John Bolton.
So back to John Bolton. of the same ilk, of the same kind of twisted brains. So John Bolton, he wrote his new shitty book that exposes everything that the Trump, I guess, his inner workings with Trump. I don't even know how to describe this. I guess his memoirs of working in the White House.
I guess so. Under Trump.
Under Trump. And the book, I don't plan on reading the book.
Neither do I. I'm not going to give him
I don't plan
money.
on diving into John Bolton's book.
Somebody else can read it and give me the fucking Spark Notes,
But I didn't even look at the Wall Street Journal article that released it. I looked at the CNN article that is basically shadowing the Wall Street Journal article about the major points that come from the book, because they have already had access to it. And they had some bullet points up. I'm just going to go through them. And these are the points that Trump made about his time in the White House. So the first glaring one that I think is the first one that you see on the news is that Trump asked President Xi Jinping for help getting reelected.
Yeah, this one's juicy. Juicy and salacious. And also super liberal clickbaity too, right? So like we're all still reeling over.
But the thing is though is that he's so anti-China. Mm-hmm. It's like hard. It's hard to like connect. It's harder to connect those dots for people. They're like, oh wait, what?
I mean, nah, that's not too hard. Like I don't see Trump as being above asking anyone to help him get reelected at this point.
Listen, you make stupid stuff. I like you. Yeah, we should get along.
Like if it's going to benefit Trump in any way, I think he's willing to like forego any like moral compass or any like of his previous, I mean, you just look at his tweets, dude. Like he's tweeted so much shit about Obama and then goes and does the same shit. So like he doesn't have moral standards, like talk about golfing,
Trump and Obama are incredibly similar to how they've been president.
I would only agree with that for very specific situations.
I don't think not at like how they present themselves obviously is complete. They couldn't be more further apart, but I think policy wise they're not too far. I think that they would be handling the exact same thing. Like everything that's been going on with like the protest at the very least, with COVID-19, I think they both would have done the same thing as each other. I don't think either of them would have handled anything differently.
I mean, Obama did create a whole like pandemic response team to try and prevent this, and Trump dismantled it before that pandemic happened. So I don't agree on the COVID-19 one. I probably don't agree on the protest one just by the virtue of him being black.
What do you think he would have done? What, put more boots on the ground? Like you're saying he would have done something to stop the protest?
No,
because Trump didn't do anything.
Quite the opposite. So Trump was very laissez-faire about the whole thing. Like he was just like, you guys should do some more things about this, and maybe I'll send the troops in.
He just
but, like,
tweeted.
He just tweeted about it, right? He was just like talking about his ass, but he didn't actually do anything. I think Trump might be. Obama would have been a more proactive. I think he would have gone on the ground. Like especially,
you think he would have been more. He would have actually put boots on the ground to stop riots or protests.
No. I actually think that he would have joined the protests in D.C. I think he would have gone to the ground and joined them.
Yeah, but that's not policy. That's optics. That's
action. That's action.
That's political theater.
We want to talk about political theater. Trump decided to tear gas a bunch of peaceful protesters so he can take a fucking picture in front of a.
Does it either? Most of what Trump, almost 90% of his actions are political theater. Yeah. I'm just saying that there's a difference between policy and political theater. Like Trump doing that stupid photo shoot at the church is like lousy, lowbrow political theater. Obama is better at his political theater. So it's like, oh wait, look, our president, he just shot a 3-point shot in a rally. Wow. It's both political. I don't think like their reactions would be any different. Like Trump didn't do anything he talked about putting boots on the ground and said some silly tweets about shooting people, but he didn't do anything. Trump talks a big game, and Republicans are actually getting really frustrated A lot of right people on the right are like, Trump, stick up for us. Like, please, like, stick up for us.
Mm-hmm.
All you do is talk. That's something that is interesting to look at when you look at like right-wing media.
Yeah.
A lot of them are getting frustrated. So
anyway, back to this thing here. So Trump asking, Xi Jinping, China's president, for help to get reelected. And I guess the story behind this that Bolton tells is that Trump was asking that Xi buy more farm agricultural products from us so that, the economy would look good and that the farmers will love him and all of this stuff. So that was the whole thing behind that. And that seems pretty feasible. Like, I feel like that's something he would do.
That's like asking for anything that, oh yeah, like, I want something to benefit my country so it will help me get reelected. Like, that's not
right.
The way it's phrased is like, let's collude and get me, like,
right, exactly.
Use TikTok to get me elected somehow. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Manipulate, like, that's the way it's presented.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Everyone is trying to get reelected by the economic conditions of the country,
of course,
if they're good or if they're able to spend them in a way that,
if they're smart, that's what they should do, right? They should do something to benefit the United States economy so that they have an easier time.
Yeah, they're trying to make more people have more money so they get more votes.
Right.
That's not a smoking gun.
No.
It's not like, oh, look at the collusion.
No,
it's just worded.
Yeah.
To make it seem like that.
Yeah. This is Bolton, like, kind of editorializing
I think a lot of it's
a little
CNN.
bit.
I don't know. This might be CNN's take on it. I'm not sure.
Well, I didn't read the Wall Street Journal take on it, but I actually think the source here is Bolton. I think Bolton spiced it up a bit to make it to make more book sales.
All right. Here's the next one. Trump had no problem with China's concentration camps. I probably would agree with Bolton. I don't think he cared.
Yeah, I don't think he cared either.
He's like, what's going on there? Oh, free education? Okay.
Oh, just a bunch of Muslims. All right, cool.
And then
whatever.
Someone's like, hey, they are these are basically concentration camps, right? And you're like, oh, really? What's the? Okay, I'll use it. Then they'll use it for political reasons, but I don't think that. All right, you can't look at one situation and be like, if you look at Saudi Arabia and what they're doing to Yemen, what they have been doing to Yemen, and him talking about creating jobs off that, like there's going to be 1 million jobs that are created from the arms sales to Saudi Arabia that are used to make Yemen a crater.
Right.
Like, you can't be a compliment to those policies like John Bolton was, someone who provoked those type of policies,
right?
And then go ahead and be like, "Oh, we didn't care about the Uyghurs." Oh.
Yeah,
but come on, man.
It's pot calling the kettle black there, like
you advocate for insane policy,
right?
Like this. You know what Trump should do? This is how I would combat this. Instead of suing him like he's doing,
which is such a bitch move, by the way. Can we agree on that? Like, it's such a bitch move.
They're trying to get him on a felony because apparently there's classified information in the book, and he didn't go through the reviews.
What I read was that he went through. All right, I'm not going to stick up for Bolton here because fuck Bolton, but I read an account that said that he went through a pretty rigorous review of his book to make sure that there was no classified information, and then late stage in the game, right after they had published it and printed it, they wanted to come. The Trump administration sent some folks in, try to say that there's more classified information in there. Like, I don't like Bolton, but I actually think he went through the proper channels. And then when Trump caught wind that this book is coming out, it's probably not going to be great for him. They did everything they could to make sure that it looks like he's breaking some critical national security information. Like, that's 100%. And you can see this evidence just by the way that they're trying to sue him and censor him, which is straight up censor him, on some bullshit national security nonsense. I guarantee you there's nothing critically relevant in John Bolton's book. It's fucking John Bolton.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean?
I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything of importance in there.
It's John Bolton.
What he should do is just call him Michael Bolton.
Yeah, yeah.
And just like
Oh,
just
great.
with a straight face, every single time he talks about John Bolton, just refer to him as Michael Bolton, and just for now on. And when the media goes crazy, they're like, his name's John, like Michael Bolton.
Oh yeah,
Like,
Mike. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, Michael Bolton.
Mike Bolton.
So let's see. So
What else do we got on there?
Pompeo, famously loyal to the president. Yeah, right. Pompeo, loyal. Famously loyal to the president. The only thing that Mike Pompeo is loyal to is a cheeseburger.
And even then,
May have trash talked him.
duh.
Yeah, duh.
Like everybody talks shit about Trump. Fucking his family probably talks shit about him. Like,
even Mike Pompeo didn't like him.
okay.
Trump offered to help Turkey's leader avoid a justice probe. I don't really know this much about that. To be
Erdogan?
honest.
So it's like
One.
helping Erdogan?
Helping Erdogan on a justice probe, the 2018. All right, I don't know this much. I'm not going to harp on this one.
Yeah.
Unless you know some
I
insight.
don't know shit about this one. All I'm saying is probably.
I have no
I don't know,
like
maybe.
reference to take.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go with my instinct and say that John Bolton is a piece of shit. All right, the Israeli prime minister didn't understand why Kushner led on Middle East peace. All right, this sounds ridiculous. This sounds stupid.
That's kind of bullshit. Yeah.
You're telling me that
Bibi didn't understand.
Bibi and Kushner didn't understand that he had the ability to write the Middle East peace plan?
Yeah, no,
because
this is bullshit.
That was most likely the whole plan in the first place, because the Kushners and the Netanyahus were family fucking friends. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me, man? Like, do you not think that Netanyahu didn't want Jared Kushner because of his lack of experience to write the plan or to come up with a plan?
Right. And
What world is that? Of course he wanted him to write the plan because he wanted to write it.
Yeah.
Like, who do you...
I don't know if this is a quote that you pulled, but like this one sentence said, he, Netanyahu, was enough of a politician to not oppose the idea that, Kushner was going to head up this peace plan. Does not oppose the idea publicly, but he, much like the rest of the world, wondered why Kushner thought he would succeed where the likes of Kissinger had failed. It's like that is not an accurate representation. I think
that was not what.
That's not what he was thinking.
Like, how is this young Kushner going to do it when Kissinger couldn't even achieve peace?
That's not what he was thinking.
Wants the desire with Palestinians is peace and security. Kushner, like, no.
Yeah, just hard no. Hard no on that. Yeah. Hard no.
I'm glad we're on the same page on that.
Yeah.
Right, the White House decision-making process was like a food fight. All right, that's believable.
Yeah, totally.
I
else is
envision
new?
monkeys throwing shit at each other.
Yeah. Yeah, what else is new?
Trump didn't like sanctions on Russia. No, he didn't.
Okay. And how is that salacious?
Yeah, like,
You know?
I mean, it's pretty clear through the Flynn transition transcript with Kislyak that he didn't want them. Trump's revealing questions, is Finland part of Russia?
Okay, that one's definitely got to be true. I believe that one. I believe that one.
Hey, man. They're a little too close to each other and a little too.
I don't think Trump can't point to Finland on a map. I mean, like, this dude and geography really just doesn't make sense when he's trying to buy Greenland at one point. Like, I don't think he's like, geography and him, they just don't work very well. Yeah, like totally. This is, and yeah, does it point out that he's a fucking idiot? Sure, but like, we don't need a Bolton book to tell me that Donald Trump says stupid shit. Like, he just does it openly,
Haha, this guy can't even point out Latvia on a map. What a retard. Oh.
It's like, okay.
What do you mean you don't know where Helsinki is located?
You don't know where Estonia is? Like, come on, it's right there.
You can't point out the latitude longitude of Malta?
Oh man,
You don't know the square miles of the DRC? What's wrong with you, man?
I bet you don't even know where Lesotho is.
Is that like a trick question? Is that like in America?
No, Lesotho is an island. It's not like an island. It's like a landlocked island nation in Africa, like in the South Africa. It's just a small, little, tiny country.
I want to make up a country or like pull a country from like a video game or fantasy.
Wakanda.
Like, yeah, you don't even know where Gondor is.
I know, right?
Where's bro? Come on, it's like Gondor borders Rohan.
Right. It's right there, right on the plains.
What are you, Dornish? All right, what the fuck was I?
What's next?
I lost myself.
Trump told people that Venezuela is really part of the U.S. and wanted to invade.
Well, you know what? I'm pretty sure Bolton thought that it was part of the U.S. with the direction of his policy.
Right. Trump told that to people because Bolton told him that first.
Yeah. He's like, hey, it's part of the U.S. He's like, oh, okay. You know, we know what the Monroe Doctrine is. He's like, oh, what is it? You know, it means that we control everything on this side of the hemisphere. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then he goes and tells people, hey, did you know that Venezuela is really part of the U.S.?
Well, he's the one. Well, something that's not in this article is that Bolton is the one that pushed Juan Guaido down Trump's throat.
Really?
Yeah, he's the one who pushed him, and Trump didn't like him. Trump thought he was weak. But this wasn't. He's like, no, I don't like him.
Yeah. So this is a Bolton brainchild for sure. Yeah. I smell Bolton all over that.
So yeah, Trump wanted Attorney General Barr to make CNN reporters serve time in jail.
Actually, I think he probably did. I could see that. He really hates CNN.
Yeah.
Like,
I wouldn't put past Trump to want to jail a journalist if he could. Especially. And then Ivanka's emails. So what Ivanka was using.
She was using a private email.
Or a private email.
She was using a private email to do government business before she officially got her government job from Daddy. And then that information came out right around the time of Jamal Khashoggi killing. And evidently, according to...
I remember that now.
Yeah, according to Bolton, in his book, he says that Trump started vocally backing MBS during this whole debacle because he knew that it would divert attention away from Ivanka's emails.
Jesus Christ, that sounds so full of shit. The reasons why he backed him is because it's Saudi Arabia, and
right.
They had already the Trump administration had already basically put all their cards behind MBS before he was even named Crown Prince. Like, of course he was going to back him because that's their guy on the throne.
Yeah, I think that it was probably a convenient afterthought.
Maybe.
It was convenient that it happened around the time that Ivanka's email scandal came out, right? That's certainly convenient, but I agree with you. I don't think he was thinking, hey, let me just back a war criminal. Let me just back this absolute fucking piece of shit right now because then nobody's going to talk about Ivanka's emails. I don't know.
They had been
I don't
working.
think he's smart enough.
They had relations in the line of communication open with MBS before he was pushed up the crown prince over his uncle, bin Nayef.
Yeah.
So it's like that's full. That is their, like, one of the guys they see. They don't have that many allies in the world.
Right.
Like the Trumps, they have outside the world, like, the people they have are like the Likud party and
that's pretty much it.
The current branch of the royal family, but that could change at any time.
Yep. They could all end up in the Ritz-Carlton tomorrow.
Because there's another side of that family that is more in favor of like the Democratic establishment than the Trump team.
Right.
Just like there's like a difference between like Israel. And the Likud party is more on the side of Republicans, and then the amalgamation of what they have right now with like blue and white is more
with the coalition.
Yeah,
government.
It's like everyone has.
Everyone's got a team.
It's like a right
everyone's
wing.
got a
It's like a
team.
right wing, left wing thing more so than like one country likes the other one.
Yeah.
Like right now, Brazil is like Team Trump.
Right. Hard right.
Bolsonaro.
Yep. Fuck that guy. Fuck that guy. I don't like
All
him.
right. So that's pretty much all I got. I don't really have anything else to say. We're at
time.
an hour and 40. We're at an hour and 40 minutes today.
Well, it didn't last
Anything
3
else?
hours this time around.
Yeah. Well, it's nice not to talk about something controversial.
Yeah.
Hey, let's not talk about like anything controversial.
light topics.
Some light topics. All right. So back to the Israel lobby.
Yeah. Right. Oh man.
Back to false flag chemical weapons attacks. Let's keep this lighthearted. Let's not talk about.
Let's keep this lighthearted. 20 Indians died in a
sensitive-
fist fight in the Himalayas.
No sensitive issues today. Let's talk about chemtrails. All right. So, do you have anything to say before we say goodbye?
No.
Do we have any announcements we have to make?
Well, just like us on the things.
Yeah. So, rate and review the podcast if you haven't already. If you're in iTunes, we're at 294 right now, I think, on the Apple. So it'd be cool to get us to 300
for our 150th episode. That's 2 reviews an episode. What?
So then do that, and if you haven't looked at the live stream, then go to our YouTube channel, and you can see us live. So go there, and otherwise, just follow us on our social media links that are in the description, and we're good. I think that's all we have to pitch.
Yep.
See, we're not overbearing.
That's it.
We don't give you a million websites to support or anything like that. We just say rate and review the podcast.
For now.
For now. We can't make those promises. All right. Peace.
Peace.